Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Pain is temporary. It may last for a minute, or an hour, or a day, or even a year. But eventually, it will subside, and something else will take its place. If I quit, however, it will last forever.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you made it out today. So welcome once again to Livewire. Have you ever felt like giving up? Anybody ever felt like giving up? Have you ever just felt like throwing in the towel? Have you ever just felt like quitting? Have you ever just felt like waving the white flag? Have you ever just felt like surrendering? Like, have you ever just felt like giving up on your marriage and just like, it's not even worth it. It's not worth it anymore. I'm just gonna give this up. I mean, we fight all the time. We're constantly arguing. It just seems like we're not gonna make it. I know we made a commitment to each other, but it just seems like we're not gonna make it. I think we just need to throw in the towel. I just think, have you ever felt like giving up? Have you ever felt like just quitting at work? I mean, your boss is mean, or the company's just going downhill, or the people that you work with, they're just not good people, or they're just constantly negative, or just some things that are happening. Have you ever just felt like giving up? Have you ever felt like giving up on your career? You started your business and you started your career and you opened up a storefront, or you opened up the restaurant, or you opened up something, and it just doesn't seem like it's going the way that you thought it would go, and it doesn't seem like you're making money, and it doesn't seem like you're making ends meet, and it doesn't seem like it's going to actually be a success like you saw it in your mind's eye. Have you ever felt like giving up? Have you ever felt like quitting? I don't know about you, but I know I felt like quitting before. I know there's in the 7 years that I've been the lead pastor at this church, in the 7 years that we started this church, Christine and I, that we started this church, there's been several times where I felt like quitting, giving up. This ain't worth it. Let me just throw in the towel. Have you ever felt like just, you know what, this isn't worth it? You feel like maybe you're just, you're just getting by financially, and you just want to give it up. Or maybe you're even at that place where you're just struggling with something so bad. You're just really, really wrestling with something. You're really addicted to something, and maybe you've even gotten to the place that you're not only discouraged, but you've reached that place where you're depressed. And from that place of depression, the thought has come to your mind. The thought has occurred to you that maybe it's just worth it for me to end my life. Maybe I just need to give it all up. Maybe I just need to end my life. Maybe I just need to call it quits on my life as a whole and just be over it. I don't have to deal with this anymore. I don't have to deal with this pain anymore. I don't have to deal with this weakness anymore. I don't have to deal with this addiction. I don't have to deal with the fighting all the time. I don't have to deal with trying to make it from week to week or paycheck to paycheck. I don't have to deal with that. And I know this is kind of heavy as we kick off this message, white flag. Have you ever just felt like just waving the white flag? Maybe we should. Maybe we should surrender. Maybe we should give up. Maybe we should quit. And now that I've got your attention, just hang on with me for just a few moments, but maybe we should give up on our marriage. Maybe we should quit on our career. Maybe we should just walk away from it. And even though we've got all the school loans, the college loans, and all of that, maybe we should walk away from it. Maybe we should walk away from our marriage, or walk away from whatever it is that's going on. Maybe we should just quit. Maybe we should just give in to the addiction. There's a guy that walked with Jesus. Actually, he was one of Jesus' students, and And his name is Peter, and Jesus had 12 students that walked with him, 3.5 years that walked with Jesus. And this one guy, Peter, Jesus had a close relationship with 3 of them, Peter, James, and John, Peter being one of them. And we pick up a story where Peter kind of felt maybe the same way that you have felt before, maybe the same way that I've felt before, or maybe the same way that we're feeling presently right now. And actually, where we're picking up this instance, this event that took place, it's after Jesus came back to life. Remember, Jesus was crucified. He was nailed to a cross. He died on that cross. He was placed in the tomb, placed in the grave. But 3 days later, he came back to life. And there were several times that Jesus appeared to the disciples, to his students. And so this is one of those instances that Jesus is on the beach, they're out on the boat, they're fishing, and then they recognize that it's Jesus on the shore, because he tells them, throw your net over here, and they catch a bunch of fish. And Peter is reminded of the first time that happened when he first met Jesus. The same thing happened. And so when John, one of the other disciples, says, it's the Lord, Peter jumped into the water and started swimming to Jesus. And he swam to the shore. And then they all got together and they had breakfast. They had fish for breakfast and they were eating. But then Jesus needed to have a heart-to-heart with Peter. He had to bring Peter aside and just have a little talk with Peter. And so we picked this up in John, and it's funny because John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John Mark wrote Peter's account of Jesus' life, what Peter heard and what Peter saw of Jesus' life. And it's funny because you would think Peter would talk about this moment, but actually John, one of the other disciples, is actually the one that records this event that took place. And so this is after breakfast, after all of this happened, after breakfast, John 21, John writes in verse 15, he says, after breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said, Peter, do you love me more than these? Now the thing I'm thinking, because Jesus doesn't really clarify who these are, and so I'm kind of wondering, well, and I don't know if you asked the question, and this is what I do whenever I'm preparing a message or when I have my quiet time or devotion, I'm asking questions, because that's when the Spirit of God will talk to us. That's when the Spirit of God will pour into our lives and speak to us about the Scripture, about the Bible, about the things that God had men and women pen down that we know of as Scripture. And so I'm asking the question, well, God, what were you referring to? Like, did Peter, what are these? He says, Peter, do you love me more than these? Maybe he was talking about the other guys. Peter, do you love me more than you love these guys? More than you love your friends? Do you love me more than them? Or maybe he was talking about the food. Like he could have said, well, Peter, do you love me more than the food that you're eating, this fish that you're eating? Do you love me more than sustenance? Do you love me more than food itself? Do you love me more, Peter? Or maybe he was talking about Peter's profession, because Peter was a fisherman, and actually there were several of them that were fishermen. Maybe he was talking about Peter's profession, and he was saying, Peter, do you love me more than your career of fishing? Do you love me more than that which you are passionate about? Do you love me more, Peter, than your career? Do you love me more, Peter, than the money that you make from your job, from your profession, from your career? The fact of the matter is, we could place just about anything in there that Jesus was asking Peter. Because he asked Peter, he said, Peter, and this is that word, agape. We'll come back to that in just a few moments. But Jesus is telling Peter, Peter, do you agape me? Do you remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about the different levels of love, or that in the Greek language there are different definitions for the word, our English word love, that there are different words of love in the Greek language? Well, agape is one of them, and agape is the highest form of love. And it's that selfless giving type of love. And so Jesus is asking Peter, Peter, are you willing to give up everything for me? Are you willing to give up everything for me, Peter? Now we know that Jesus was willing, and that Jesus did give up everything for not only Peter, but for all of mankind. Actually, even just specifically looking at Peter's life, there were many times, if you've read the gospel accounts before, you know that there were several times that Peter stuck his foot in his mouth. There were several times that Peter just said some stupid stuff, that he just said some dumb stuff. And Jesus loved him through it. Jesus still considered him as one of his closest friends, that these three, Peter, James, and John, they got to experience some special things that the other students didn't get to experience. And still, Jesus loved him through that. And so even in the times where Peter stuck his foot in his mouth, even in the times where Peter showed his weaknesses, Jesus said, hey, I love you, Peter. I'm willing to give it up for you. And there was another time, actually, that was not too far from this time, where Jesus is having a little heart-to-heart with Peter, and we'll look at the rest of this conversation in just a second, but there was a time where Jesus needed Peter the most, where Jesus was totally dependent upon Peter, where Jesus was relying on Peter to stand upon his faith, that faith that he had built for almost 3 years, that Jesus was relying on Peter to stand up for what was right and to stand up for the truth. And instead, and Jesus told Peter this is exactly what was going to happen, instead Peter denied him 3 times. You remember that? Where Peter stood right in front of Jesus. And he said, Lord, I'm ready to go to death with you. I'm ready, Lord. I'm ready. I'm ready to stand up for you. I'm ready to do this. You're the way, you're the truth, you're the life, you're the Messiah, you're the Savior of the world, and I'm ready to die for you. But when it came time to die for Jesus, when it came time to stand up for what he believed, when it came time to stand up for the truth, what did Peter do? He said, no, I don't even know the man. I've never been with him. What are you talking about? In fact, the last time that he denied Jesus, he started cussing. It got that bad. He started cussing. Peter, when Jesus needed him most, Peter denied him. And yet Jesus loved him still. You know how I know that? Because remember when the ladies came to the tomb after Jesus was crucified? They went to the tomb. They went to go prepare the body because they weren't able to prepare the body after the crucifixion, so they wanted to kind of go do that and honor Jesus' death. Well, Jesus they actually met Jesus afterwards, and Jesus gives them this instruction. After he talks to them, the resurrected Christ, Jesus tells them, hey, I want you to tell the rest of my disciples and Peter. You tell my students and you tell Peter. I'm going to meet him. I'm going to meet him over by the lake. I'm going to be there. You tell him I want him there. I want them there. It's funny that Jesus singled out. Why did he single out Peter? Why did he single out Peter? Because he wanted Peter to know, Peter, I still want you on my team. I want you there, Peter. I want you to be there. I don't want just all the rest of my students, Peter. I want you to be there. See, Jesus still loved Peter, even though he denied him 3 times that he ever knew him. Nope, I don't know him. I don't know him. And then Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice for Peter and for the entire world. And that was when he died on that cross, when he gave up his life. See, so you can't tell me that Peter or that Jesus wasn't willing to give up everything for Peter, because he did. He gave up a bunch. He gave up everything, including his life on that cross for Peter. And now he was asking Peter, Peter, do you love me? Are you willing to give up everything for me? And you know, I think we need to ask ourselves the very same question. Like, are we willing to give up everything for God? Are we willing to give up everything for him? Are we willing to love him? Because that's what it means to love, that selfless, again, that selfless action, that selfless giving type of love. That are we willing? I mean, maybe we have to be honest with ourselves a little bit. Maybe we have to say that we love, maybe we have to be honest about something or someone else that we love more than we love God, more than we love Jesus. Because I believe that Jesus is asking us the question today, and he's saying, do you love me more than anything else? And I think we've got to be honest. Do we love our career more than? Do we love our marriage? Do we love our wife, our spouse, our husband? Do we love that person more than we love God? Do we love finances? Do we love having a bunch of money more than we love God? Do we love our friends more than we love God? Because Jesus was having this heart-to-heart with Peter. And again, we're going to look at the rest of this conversation, but he's having this heart-to-heart with Peter. And he says, Peter, do you love me like I love you? Are you willing to give it all up like I've given it all up for you? See, the fact of the matter is loving God is the best choice you and I could ever make for our life. I mean, think about that for a moment. God can do anything. He can do anything. And not only can he do anything, but he wants to do the best. He wants to give you and I the very best in our life. I mean, where are we losing in that? Honestly, think about that for a moment. God can do whatever he wants, and he can do whatever he wants. Make it personal. God can do whatever he wants in your personal life. And what he wants to do is something good, something beneficial. He wants to bring the very best into your life and into my life. Where do we lose in that? Where are we losing when we say, God, I'm going to give you it all. I'm going to love you, God, just like you love me. I'm going to give up everything for you. I'm going to extend to you. I'm going to express to you the same type of love that you express to me. I'm going to give that love. It's going to be a sacrificial, a selfless giving type of love back to you, just like I receive from you, God. Because I know what you're getting ready to do in my life. I know what you want to do in my life. Where do we lose in that? See, I mean, we don't lose in loving God. We're not losing much. In fact, what we lose is only what's going to be detrimental to our life. God has never asked you to give up and will never ask you to give up something that is good for your life. Now, there may be something that is good in your life that you know is absolutely, it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's not sinful. But it might be that God asks you to give it up for a period of time simply because you love it more than you love him. But God's not going to tell you to give up anything that's good in your life. He's not going to take away the good. In fact, God is the one that wants to bring the very good in our lives. So what does it mean to love God? And again, this word love, it's that selfless giving type of love. But what does it mean to love God? Well, Jesus said this. It means to love him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength. Or in other words, loving God or to love God, it means to love him with every fiber of our being, with everything that makes us up. And so that's why he says the mind, and that's why he says the heart, and that's why he says the strength. That's why he says all of those things, because it makes up who we are. We think with our mind. We believe with our heart. We do things with our strength, right? And so God's saying, give me all of your heart. Give me all of your mind. Give me all of your strength. Give me your soul. Give me the ability to redeem your very life, redeem your soul by saving you. God says, give me that. So Jesus said, if we're going to love God, it means to love him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength. Or in other words, love him with every fiber of our being. Love him with everything that makes up my life. So that means my marriage, and that means my friendships, and that means my finances, and that means my career, and that means my hobby, and that means my lifestyle, and that means my behavior, and that means my attitude. It means everything. But the fact of the matter is we have to be honest with ourselves. I've got to be honest with myself, and you got to be honest with yourself. Are we willing to go that far with God? Are we really willing to love him again like he loves us? Are we willing to give it all up for him? So again, Jesus asked Peter, Peter, do you love me? And here's Peter's response, and here's the rest of the conversation. Back to verse 15. Notice this. He asked Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know I love you. Then feed my lambs. So Jesus gives him some direction. Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, so Jesus is asking it a second time. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. A third time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was so hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything." He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." He asked him 3 times, "Simon, do you love me? Do you love me?" Do you know the reason that Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And notice that after every time that he asked him the question, he gave him some direction. He told him, he essentially was telling him, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter responds, "Yes, Lord, you know I do." And he says, "Well, Peter, I've got a purpose for your life. Peter, I've got a reason for you being on this earth. Peter, I know, you and I both know, and as we're having this heart-to-heart, and as I'm gonna shoot straight with you, Peter, you and I both know what happened. You and I both know what took place." It's amazing that Peter denied him 3 times, and Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" Now, the reason that Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" it wasn't because Jesus was trying to pour salt on the wound. It wasn't because Jesus was trying to make Peter feel bad. And the reason I know that is because he tells him, "Peter, do you love me?" Or he asks him, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter responds, "You know I do," 3 times, right? And after each time, again, Jesus says, "Then do this. Then know this, Peter, know that I have a purpose for your life. Know that I have a reason for you being on this earth." In other words, Jesus was trying to reaffirm to Peter, "Peter, I haven't given up on you. Peter, I'm not casting you aside. Peter, I know what happened, and I want to ask you 3 times because I want you to know, Peter, that I love you no matter what. That I love you no matter what. That there is nothing that you could ever do, Peter, that would separate you from my love." And you know, sometimes I wonder if we're in that same boat and we just say, "Well, you know, Josh, you don't know the weaknesses that I have. You don't know the mistakes that I've made. You don't know the flaws." Well, Peter was in that same boat. In that same boat. And Jesus told him, "Peter, I've got a purpose for your life. Your purpose isn't over. Peter, when I stood in front of you and you said to me, Peter, that you are the Son of the living God. And I responded to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I'm going to build my church." Peter, I just want you to know, I haven't forgotten about that. And Peter, I want you to know, I didn't lay that aside. That what you did when you denied me, it didn't cancel my plan for your life. And the same is true for us. I mean, I know. I'm sure. Again, if we're honest, every single one of us have probably made some terrible mistakes in our lives. Every single one of us have flaws. And every single one of us have failed in many different ways. But can I tell you something? That it doesn't matter what mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter how small or how great that mistake is. It doesn't matter what your flaws are, what you see in your life, and you just pick yourself apart. I mean, we could pick ourselves apart. And I got this wrong, I do this wrong, I'm not like this, I'm not this person, I don't have that gift, I don't have that talent. And we can name off all the flaws like Moses. "God, you don't want me to speak before the people. I can't speak, I can't talk. God, you don't want me." But the fact of the matter is, friends, I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you have put your life through. I don't care what mistakes that you've made. And even beyond me not caring, God doesn't care. He still has a purpose for your life. In fact, it doesn't matter how badly you failed, God's still interested in making you a success. There has never been a day that God is sitting on his throne, that Jesus is sitting on his throne and saying, "Man, I'm just done with that person. They're a failure." He's never said that about you. He's never said that about me. It's never crossed his mind that you're a failure. And yeah, I'm sure it's crossed other people's minds. Maybe it's crossed some of your friends' minds that you're a failure. Maybe it's crossed Your parents or other family members, maybe it's crossed their mind before that you're a failure. Maybe when you were a kid, a teenager, or maybe if you're a teenager right now and maybe you've heard it from your teacher, you're a failure. You'll never amount to nothing. With the one that it matters most, it's never crossed his mind that you are a failure. Now, I don't care what anybody else says, because God created them. They're created. He's the creator. And actually what he says about me is what should matter. And it's never crossed his mind that you are a failure. No, in fact, it's to the contrary. It doesn't matter. See, we think there are so many things that will separate us from God's love. We think, well, addiction, I've been bound to drugs. I've been bound to alcohol. I've been bound to pornography. I've been bound to this attitude or this particular lifestyle. And there's no way that God can love me. I've made this mistake and I've made it over and over and over and over. I've probably done it thousands of times. And there's no way that God can forgive me. I've denied God. I've denied him that he is even God, that there is even a God. I never believed that there was a God. I don't believe that there is a God. There's no way that God can love me. Well, actually, Paul talks about that. Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, later became a follower after Jesus' resurrection. Paul was a Pharisee. I mean, he was a guy that he didn't believe in the beginning. Maybe that's you. That was Paul. And then Paul had this encounter, this incredible encounter with the risen Jesus Christ. And Paul writes this letter, this particular letter that was written to the Romans. And he writes this in Romans 8:38. Paul says, I am convinced that nothing can ever separate. Do you know what the word nothing means? Nothing. He says, I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love, which Christ Jesus our Lord shows us. Paul said, I am convinced. He says, you cannot change my mind. Have you ever just believed something so badly, so much, that it doesn't matter who said what, it doesn't matter what evidence they showed you, you didn't believe it. You're just like, no, I'm totally and completely convinced. You're not going to be able to change my mind. I am convinced this is the way that I need to take my life. This is what I need to do. Well, that's what Paul's doing. Paul is saying, I am completely convinced. You're not going to change my mind on this. I know that this is absolutely true. Paul says, I am convinced that nothing, not one thing, not one person, nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Let me ask you something. What have you done that you think God can't love you through it? What have you done? What is it that is so bad in your life that you think, I'm choosing my words carefully, that you think God can't and won't love you through it? Because, listen to those words. That's what you think. That's what I think. I think God can't love me through all of my flaws. I think God can't love me through all of my mistakes. I think God can't love me through all of my failures. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what I think. The truth is, God can and God will love you and I through every single one of those things. And that's what he was telling Peter. Peter, I know what happened. I know what took place. But Peter, I just want you to know, there is nothing that can separate you from my love for you. When I said you were a rock, I still believe that you are a rock today, Peter. When I made sure, it wasn't by accident that I said, oh, the disciples, and Peter. No, I wanted to make sure that I told the women when they went to go get you guys and to meet me at a certain place, I wanted to make sure that I told the women, you make sure that my students are there, and you make sure that Peter knows that I want him there. Because Peter, there's nothing, friends, nothing can separate you, can separate me from God's love for our lives. Now, if we're not careful, and here's where studying the Bible comes into play. If we just read this conversation, we will miss something so incredible. it's easy to gloss over this conversation and not actually dig deeper into it, and we'll miss something. Again, going back to a couple weeks ago, we were looking at the different words for love that is in the Greek language. There's actually 2 of those words that are used in this conversation. In fact, just going back to that conversation, I put the words in there. Jesus asked, Peter, do you agape me? Peter replied, you know I philia you, or you know I phileo you. Remember what phileo love is, or philia love is? Again, agape is that I'm ready to give up everything. Peter, are you ready to give up everything for me? And Peter's reply is, Jesus, you know, Lord, you know that I philia you. You know that I love you. You know that we're tight. We're friends. You and I, we're buddies. That's what Peter's response to Jesus was. You and I, we're tight. We're buddies. A second time, Jesus asked him again, Peter, do you agape me? Again, Peter said, you know I phileo you. You know that I philia you. You know that that's where it's at. You know that that's where I'm at. And then a third time, Jesus asked Peter, do you phileo me? Do you philia me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I philia you. Did you notice that Jesus changed his terminology? Jesus asked twice, do you agape me? Are you ready to give it all up for me? Peter says, you know that we're buddies. Now, Peter wasn't confused. Remember, they spoke the Greek language, right? So Jesus was using agape. He was using that word, and Peter was responding with phileo, with philia. So Peter wasn't confused. Peter knew exactly what he was saying, and he knew exactly what Jesus was asking him. And so Peter's response was, you know, Lord, you know. And so Peter's a little hurt by the third time. Jesus asked, and he says, Peter, do you philia me? And Peter says, you know everything. You know it all, Jesus. You know that I philia you. Why was Peter so hurt? Why was Peter so adamant about that that him and Jesus were tight, that they were buddies? Because to Peter, here's the kicker, to Peter, that's all he thought he was capable of. That's all that he thought he was capable of. That's the love that he thought he was capable of loving Jesus with. Because he was still looking at his past. He was still looking at his mistakes. He was still looking at his flaws. And so Peter says, Lord, you know that I philia you. You know, Lord, that's what I'm capable of at this point. You know that I can't give up everything. You know what I've done. You know the mistakes that I've made. And yet Jesus asked him twice, do you agape me? And Peter says, Lord, I'm just being honest with you. You know that I'm not capable of that right now, given what I've done. And that just might be you. You're just like, all I'm capable of right now is just loving God as a friend, because I know my past. I know my faults. I know my failures. See, here's the thing is, you see who you presently are, but God sees who you will become. See, you might see your limitations, but God sees your potential. See, maybe you see the glass as half empty, but Jesus sees the glass as half full. See, we're looking at everything, again, that's wrong in our lives, and Jesus, just like Peter, he's calling us to a deeper fellowship, to a deeper relationship. And we think, well, all I'm capable of loving you with, God, is just that friend type of love. Is all I can do is just for us to be friends, because I know that I can't give up everything because of my life, because of all the mistakes that I've made, because of all my flaws. I know that I'm incapable of that. But yet Jesus was trying to get the point across to Peter. Peter, I'm calling you up, and your past is not holding you back. I know your past. I know your past better than anybody else. I know your flaws and your failures better than anybody else, but I'm looking beyond that. I'm not seeing who you presently are. I'm seeing what you will become. I'm seeing what you're getting ready to become. I'm not looking at your limitations. I see clearly your potential. God sees your potential. God sees what he can make of your life. He sees what he could do with your life. Again, it's never crossed his mind that there is no potential in you. It's never crossed his mind that you're a failure. It's never crossed his mind to just sit on and dwell on your past failures and your past mistakes. No, God says, I see your potential. I see what you can become. I see the glass as half full. The interesting thing about this is that even though Peter responded that, Lord, you know that we're tight. You know that we're friends. You know that that's what I'm capable of. Jesus still told him, Peter, feed my sheep. Take care of my lambs. Take care of my sheep. That he still wanted Peter to know, I still have a purpose for your life, and I want you to step into that purpose. In other words, listen to this. God is not waiting for you to get your life absolutely perfect before he'll use you to impact the lives of those around you. That God will use you right now where you are. I mean, you see, and I know I see in my life my mistakes. And I'm like, God, you know, how are you even using me? Why do you even want to use me? And God responds, feed my sheep, take care of my lambs, impact. Use your gifts, your talents that I've given you. Impact this world, influence one life at a time. You don't have to get your life in order. I know so many people are just like, well, you know what? I haven't been serving God that long. I haven't been a Christian that long. I don't have my life all in order. Well, God was telling Peter, Jesus was telling Peter, and it's the same thing he's telling us today. He's saying, even though that's what you believe you're capable of, Peter, loving me just as a friend, I want you to still fulfill your purpose. I still want you to serve me. I still want you to impact the lives of those around you. So don't wait, friends. There are some of you that you've had that nudging in your heart for some time now to step out in faith, to do something. Maybe it's, you know, to talk to some coworkers. Maybe it's to serve God in a greater way. Maybe it's to join a team at the church here. And you're looking at all your mistakes. You're looking at all your flaws. You're looking at everything that you see that is holding you back. And God's saying, no, it's not. It's not holding you back. I want to use you, and I want to use you right now. In fact, the way that you can determine the bar to be used by God is, have you given your life to Jesus Christ? Have you prayed that prayer? If you have, God's ready to use you right now. God's ready to impact lives through your life right now. You don't have to have it all figured out. Listen, I've been a pastor a long time. 7 years as the lead pastor of this church, 10 years as a pastor of another church. I've been a pastor a long time, okay? And I still don't have it figured out. I'm still trying to work this thing out, and I fail my faith at times, and I don't have all the answers. And God still wants to use me, and he wants to use you. He wants to use our lives. It's funny because even though Peter says, you know, that's all I'm capable of, that actually changed not too far from when him and Jesus had this conversation. And what do you think was the turning point? Well, Peter actually wrote it in his own letter. Peter writes in his own letter, 1 Peter 4:8, he says, love covers many sins. Peter came to that place and he realized that my flaws, my mistakes, my failures are no match for God's love, no match for God's forgiveness. And it was a turning point in Peter's life. And you read in the book of Acts, after Jesus goes up to heaven and now they carry out, I mean, Peter has this turnaround. And he went from phileo, from philia, to just loving Jesus. Hey, we're tight, we're friends. And he gave it all up for him. He gave up his very life. In fact, Peter, later on in his life, Peter was actually crucified. He was a martyr. He died for Jesus. He was crucified just like Jesus, but instead of being crucified right side up, he said, there is no way that I should be crucified just like my Lord. And Peter was crucified upside down. He gave up everything. He had that turning point because he realized love covers a multitude of sins. There is nothing that you can't do that God's love can't wipe that clean. So Peter had that turning point. See, the fact of the matter is, friends, your past is no match for God's love. So you remember at the top of the message, I said, maybe we should give it up. Maybe we should give up. Maybe we should quit. Maybe we should throw in the towel. Maybe we should surrender. Maybe we should wave the white flag. And honestly, I think that's what we should do. We should give it all up for Him. Because God can make your marriage so much better than you ever can make your marriage. God can make your career so much more successful, your profession so much more successful than you ever can. God can increase our finances. God can change it from working and living from paycheck to paycheck. He can make our finances go so much further. He can increase our finances way better than we ever could. God can. See, God's not asking you to take your own life physically if you're at that point, if that thought's ever crossed your mind. He is asking you to give up your life, but just to give it to Him. To give up your life, to surrender your life, to say, God, the last song we sang, do you remember? God, I need you. I'm waving the white flag right now. God, I need you. I need you in my life. I need you in my life. In fact, I want to do this. You make this personal, this question. What's stopping me from giving it all up for Jesus? What's stopping me? Is it something? Is it some person? Is it my career? My finances? Is it some addiction? What is stopping me from giving it all up for Him? Because the love covers it all. And He'll do something absolutely amazing in our lives if we'll just give it all up for Him. And so here's what I want to do. I'm going to ask you to take a step of faith right where you are. I'm going to ask you to take a step of faith. I don't want you to take this lightly. I'm going to ask you to take a step of faith. And if you're ready to say, you know what, up to this point, or for months now, or for years now, this thing or this person, this particular thing has been stopping me from giving it all up, giving my whole life to Jesus. But I'm ready to draw the line in the sand. And if that's you today, again, you be honest with yourself. And if that's you today, I just want you to stand up where you are and like me, just wave the white flag. Right where you are. If that's you, you just say, Lord, I know there's some stuff. There's just something that's stopping me. If that's you, you just say, hey, I'm already standing. Wave the white flag. Is there something you need to surrender? Is there something that you just need to turn over to God? And you just know right where you know in your life. It's not that you're in friends, listen, I'm not talking about being entrenched in some deep sin. I'm just talking about anything. I'm talking about the smallest thing. I think it's awesome that we have all of our teenagers in the back that are standing waving their white flags. But honestly, friends, I think some of us adults need to stand up and wave our white flag and say, God, yeah, that's me. You know what? This is stopping me from giving it all up for you. It's stopping me. Giving it all up for you. And I don't want it to stop me any longer. I don't want it to be in my way any longer. God, I thank you for every single person that is standing up right now. And God, really, whether we're standing up or we don't, it's an act of our faith. But God, I pray today that this would be a defining moment in our life. That we wouldn't just be about philia. That we wouldn't just phileo you, God. But that we could see, not because of our own capability, but because of your capability in us, because of your power in us, that we can see that we can love you, that we could give it all up for you, that just as you gave it all up for us, Jesus, why can't we give it all up for you? That there is nothing that can separate us from your love. God, I pray that that just enters our hearts, and that it just drives into our heart, that there is nothing that is holding us back. There is nothing that is keeping your love away from us. No sin, no shortcoming, no weakness, nothing. And so, God, I just pray that this would be that defining moment in our life where we cross over and we don't allow that thing or those things to stop us any longer from giving it all up for you and giving you the agape that you deserve, that you demonstrate to us each and every day of our lives. We thank you for it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Yeah, let's give him praise.